Alrighty, Shabbat Shalom again.
Shabbat Shalom.
And the message I'm giving today is called Remember Lot's Wife. And I know you remember because we were only there 2 days ago. So now we will kind of take everything. We talked a lot when we were up there in Lot's cave, but now we'll kind of piece it all in together. Luke 17 and verse 32 says, remember Lot's wife. And, you know, looking throughout the whole New Testament, you know, of end time scriptures, I couldn't find any other character in the whole New Testament where we're told to remember. So you would think if something's there, remember, it would be like, remember the faith of the Apostle Shaul, or remember the faith of the Apostle Peter. And you don't see it, but yet in the end time it says, remember Lot's wife. So this kind of passing character, right, that is the only oddity that people even know her is because of being turned into a pillar of salt, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yet, this kind of passing character in the book of Genesis that's there, and here we were yesterday, blessed to be up there where Lot fled to with his daughters, we're told to remember her, right? So, when Yahweh says remember something, he says it for a reason. So there's something that not just the Laodicean or not just somebody, but everybody, everyone, we're told, remember Lot's wife. So there's a lesson for all of us in here. And let's start looking into this. Let's go to Genesis 19. Genesis 19. First in verse 17, then I'll drop to verse 23. And it happened as they led them outside, he said, escape for your life. So this is after the cherubs come, you know, and all the things are going on, and they're lingering all night. But now he's saying, get out of here. Don't look behind you, and do not stay in the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest you be swept away. Right? So it's almost like when we're reading those scriptures, he on the rooftop, don't even come down. You know, that it's that serious like that. It's at that time that if you lose a second, you could lose your life. Drop down to verse 23. The sun had gone forth on the earth, and Lot came into Zoar, meaning small. And Yahweh, the Yahweh that was on earth in the chapter before, in Genesis 18, Yeshua Yahweh, rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh the Father out of the heavens. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain, and all those living in the cities, and the produce of the ground. And it's interesting because when you go to Gomorrah on the Israeli side, because of how hot the fire was, and because of how quickly it burned, it literally like melted together. And you can still see, you can see outlines of buildings, even Sphinx, you can see outlines of Sphinx. You know, we've been there many times. And the sulfur balls, the millions of sulfur balls that rain down, they're still there. You can pick them out of the buildings that are there. So, the punishment never changed. It's not still burning, you know, but the punishment was forever. And his wife, Lot's wife, looked back with pleasure from behind, and she became a pillar of salt. And literally, like I was saying, she was a pillar of salt. So it's kind of interesting that, like I said, the only character in the whole New Testament that we're told to remember, we don't even know her name. He doesn't even name her. And names are so important. Why doesn't he name her? Because that's it. That's the end of it. Like when the kingdom comes, she's going to be no more. He purposely didn't name her. Because she was a pillar of salt, because her destiny was already set by her own free will. Not from Yahweh, but her own free will. So her name isn't important because her name is going to be blotted out forever. There's no reason to remember her name. But there's a big lesson in us to learn. And I'm going to go over 3 reasons here why we have to remember Lot's wife. All 3 are important, but the third one is the most important. And the first one is, she wanted to see the punishment. You know, she looked back because she wanted to see the punishment. In Proverbs 20 and verse 8, it says, a king who sits on the throne of judgment does not look upon any evil with his eyes. So, we should not look on evil. This is one thing we learn. And we have to be careful because we're living in a world where not only physically looking on evil, and that's why we need to be out of the cities. You know, I mean, the city is the last place you want to live in today, especially big cities, because it's only evil. You know, evil is corrupted. And almost, a matter of fact, I can't think of it, maybe there is one, somebody might write me, but I can't think of one major city in the world, a big city, that is not totally liberal. You know, almost 90% or more. You know, that's what happens in the big cities. You know, so really, it's not a place you want to be, and there is a lot of evil, but you don't only have to be in a city to see evil, right? Because of TV, internet, there was a study that they said the average child sees on TV, by the time they're 18 years old, 200,000 acts of violence and 40,000 murders. 200,000 acts of violence and 40,000 murders by the average. Which means, you know, there's children that don't even watch TV. So what does that tell you? That there's a lot of ones seeing more than that. And you become numb to it. That's the problem, as we're going to see, that you don't realize how numb you're becoming to the society around you. And it happened even to Lot. You know, part of it is, we're going to see, Lot was part of the problem too. It wasn't just his wife, you know. And the wife also suffered because of what he wasn't to her. Amos 5 in verse 18. Amos 5 in verse 18 says, "Woe to those desiring the day of Yahweh. What is it for you? The day of Yahweh is darkness and not light. As if a man fled from a lion and a bear met him. Or he goes into the house and leans on his hand against the wall and a snake bites him. Shall not the day of Yahweh be darkness and not light, even very dark and not any brightness in it?" So there's people out there that are so into prophecy. And even every time something happens in Israel, you know, and maybe I feel a little different because I've lived there for more than 2 decades, and I've seen war. I've been there during war. People that are good friends of mine and neighbors of mine, I've seen how they've had people killed. And there's probably not in Israel is not a big country. There's probably hardly an Israeli you could find today that has not been personally affected by the war going on right now. Either their relative or a friend was one of the people killed on October 7th, or a soldier that was killed, you know, or somebody affected by it. And that's the hard part, that it's not just minimalized. So we got to be careful, because although, you know, Yahweh puts prophecy in there because he wants us to see the times we're living in, it shouldn't be like a game. And, you know, there's people, they have prophecy conferences, and people go to these conferences. They pay a lot of money. They pay $100 just to go in and hear all the stuff about prophecy and this and that. So we want to be careful that we're not like in an evil way looking forward to this, because this is the worst time the world has ever known. And when it's over, 97% of the people on the planet are going to be dead, and a lot of people only figuring out how to survive. You have all these preppers that they got their underground things, and they got, you know, 15 years of all that that food that's like freeze dried and all that stuff. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if 97% of the people are going to be dead, what makes me even think I'm going to be alive? And if I am, I am. It's up to Yahweh's will. But certainly, you know, it shouldn't be like a survival game. But again, we're living in that kind of world, right? Where people watch all this stuff on television. There's all kinds of, you know, reality TV. Where that's what they do. They drop people down in places or islands, and they have to survive. And it mentally messes your brain up to live in this kind of society today. And that's why Yahweh tells us, come out of it. It's so evil. So it's evil to want to see evil. And just think to yourself, I don't care where you are in the world, when there's an accident that happens on the side of the road. Why? If somebody is broken on the side of the road and they need a change of tire or something, nobody stops. They could be waving down like there's nobody. If there's an accident and there's blood, forget about it. Everybody wants to see it. It's like this evil part of our human nature that people want to see all this gory stuff. You know? What's the biggest movies people go to see? Is all these horror movies. And for what reason? Why on earth? Life is horror enough. Why would people want to go and just see people butchering each other? Because it's the world we live in. It is an evil, demonic world. And this was the first thing. that Lot's wife, the first thing we're told. So, at first you might think, oh, I'm not like her like that, but yet, there's a part in all of us probably to some degree or another, that has been conditioned not to be affected by it. I remember one time, it was after Sabbath, many, many, many years ago, and I forget what it was, we were in somebody's house, and they had put on, it was even like a Bible movie. And because the Bible movie, they had a murder or something in there, there was a family that got up and they weren't judgmental, they just said, we're not going to watch this, we'd rather go outside. And it was like impressive to me. Because, I've seen a lot of Bible movies myself, and I got to be honest, it doesn't affect me if I see somebody murdered in the Bible movie, because I'm used to it. Yet in real life, I've never stood there and seen somebody murdered, but it makes me figure I'm being conditioned to that the same way. And we all are. To one degree or another, we all are. And this is the first thing, because remember Lot's wife, like I said, it's the only person we're told in the end time, remember her. So these are the three things we have to think in our life where we can do better. The second thing is, she was happy with those who were being punished. She was happy with those being punished. And do we feel like that sometimes? Like you see somebody that maybe be an evil person. Even right now, like with President Trump. And again, I am no President Trump fan. He's a bad person, a liar. You can't trust him. But at the same rate, like I wouldn't be happy if they put him in prison. Why would I be happy? And there's people out there that just can't wait. They're like drooling for it. And if he doesn't go to prison, they'll actually mentally be sad about that. Can you imagine that your life and your happiness or unhappiness depends on somebody else having bad things happen to them? Romans 12 and verse 14. Because it's totally against the Spirit of Yahweh. Bless those persecuting you. Bless and do not curse. Drop down to verse 17. Returning evil for evil to no one. Providing right things before all men. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with all men. Not avenging yourself, beloved, but giving place to wrath. For it has been written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says Yahweh. Then if your enemy hungers, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink. For doing this, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome the evil with good. And like I said, as I read that, I think of Richard Wurmbrand, we were watching while we were here. And how, people that were, those guards, you can't imagine that people could be that sinister and evil. And instead of them getting bitter and hoping bad to them, they were actually praying for them. They were actually praying for them. And some of them got converted, by that example. Some of them literally got converted. Praise Yahweh for that. Galatians 6, 7, and 8. Galatians 6 and 7 and 8. It says, do not be deceived. Yahweh is not mocked. For whatever a man may sow, that he will also reap. For the one sowing to his flesh will reap corruption of the flesh, but the one sowing to the Spirit will reap everlasting life from the Spirit. So again, as we judge, we're going to be judged. And we don't have to worry. Because people that are evil and doing evil things, Yahweh is going to judge them. There's a judgment day, and everybody's going to get his just reward, good or bad. But the same on us. When we're judging other people, we're bringing judgment on ourselves. And that's why I say forgiveness, how powerful forgiveness is. How it releases you in your life from so many different things. The power of forgiveness. So we don't want to take revenge on other people. Hebrews 12 and verse 15. Hebrews 12 and verse 15. It says, watching diligently that not any lack from the grace of Yahweh, that no root of bitterness growing up may crowd in on you, and through this many are defiled. So we want to make sure we're not getting a root of bitterness. And when you're thinking of people getting their just reward, I'm not going to go there, but, you think of the book of Esther, right? The whole story of Esther, how much Haman was jealous of Mordecai and wanted, because of his jealousy of Mordecai, he wanted every Jew to be killed. And you see, we're living this today, right? How many people hate the Jews and this and that? And yet, from that hatred would happen, the very gallows that he made, he wound up getting hung in. So it's the same in our life, that a lot of times when you're making a trap for somebody else, look out, you're going to wind up maybe falling that trap yourself. Matthew 5 in verse 43. Matthew 5 in verse 43. It says, "You have heard that it was said, you will love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do well to those hating you, and pray for those who take you by force and persecute you, so that you may become sons of your Father in heaven, because he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those loving you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you only greet your brothers, what exceptional thing do you do? Do not the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you become perfect or complete, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." So that's developing the mind of Yahweh. You know, that we're not looking for our enemies to have bad things come. And we really should wish evil on no one. Let Yahweh be the judge of it, because it will bring bitterness in your heart, and it will affect you. And the last scripture on this is Micah 6 in verse 6. Micah 6 and verse 6 says, "With what shall I come before Yahweh to bow myself before the loftiness of Elohim? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings? With calves, son of a year? Will Yahweh be pleased with thousands of rams? With 10,000s of torrents of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Oh man, he has declared to you what is good. And what does Yahweh require of you? But to do justice, to love grace, and to walk humbly before your Elohim." So that's what Yahweh requires, right? He desires mercy and not sacrifice. But he is looking for repentance. And if you're going to get forgiven, there has to be repentance. So if there's evil people out there that are mocking and doing whatever, and in this end time, that's what you have. You have a whole world government that's doing that. Yahweh is going to take care of it, and that's part of faith. That's part of faith, trusting that he will be the one to care for it. But we don't want it affecting our mind, because again, Lot's wife. There's a reason, like I said, out of everyone in the New Testament, there's all kinds of people in that New Testament that he could have told us to remember, and yet he says, remember Lot's wife. So again, she wanted to see the punishment. She was happy with those who were punished. But the biggest reason, you know, those are good reasons and important reasons that Yahweh gives us. But the biggest reason that Yahweh says, remember Lot's wife, is because she had remorse of what she was leaving and wanted to go back from where she came from. And I think that's the biggest reason, because here in the end time, literally, he's calling us out of society. He's calling us to the wilderness. He's calling us away from the cities and out to the wilderness. And Lot's wife didn't want to leave. She loved that life. She loved it so much, and she was so ingrained in the society around her that she had remorse for not being there. She had remorse for leaving. And she didn't want to go back to where she came from. And think about it. Here we are, that Yahweh tells us, you know, leave commercial Babylon. He tells us 7 times, right? But nothing has happened yet to force us. It's still our decision. Some brethren are doing it, some brethren are not. But here in this case, she didn't have a choice. Literally, and that's why she lingered, because of how much she was part of that society, and she had no desire to leave it. To the point where, you know, they're kind of dragging her out at the last minute, and even then, her heart was back into society. And this is where we all have to look in our heart, you know. And like I said, it said she was a pillar of salt. She didn't become one, she was. That was her lot. Salt is, like I said, the covenant of salt means unchangeable. It's what you are. And in a good way, Yahweh makes a covenant of salt with his people, meaningly will never change. We're covenant believers and will be that way forever. But what is your pillar of salt in your life? What is your pillar of salt? You know, I was thinking, because we were doing in the one class, you know, what am I willing to die for? And everybody got up and said, you know, I'm willing to die for this, I'm willing to die for that. But my question now is, and maybe you could write this down, what are you willing to lose the kingdom for? What are you willing to lose the kingdom for? And you know what? If you weren't willing to lose some of the things we had on the board, then that means you're willing to lose the kingdom for that. Are you willing to lose? Write down, I'm willing to lose the kingdom for my iPhone. Because if you're not willing to give it up, that means you're willing to lose the kingdom for it. I'm willing to lose the kingdom for my job. Because if you're not willing to give it up, you're willing to lose the kingdom for it. I'm willing to lose the kingdom for, you know, my family members. He who loves father, mother, sister, brother is not worthy of me. Whatever you are putting before Yahweh, you are willing to lose the kingdom for. So think about that. Whatever it is, you know, we got 1 week left here. Whatever it is you're not willing to leave here in Sella Mountain and go without. Because it's the same kind of thing, right? This is like, and I just thought about that now. I don't have this in my notes, but it's kind of like we're living Lot's wife, right? We're here, and now in a week, we're going to be fleeing this place, right? I don't know if angels are going to take us out of here or not. But the thing is, what are you not willing to leave behind? What are you going to look back for if you can't find it? And it's kind of interesting. The last time we were here, I forget what it was, but there were a couple people that left some things. You know, one of them may have been electronic something. I forget exactly. But they wanted it. They asked, you know, can they find it? So what is it? What is it that you're not willing to leave back here? Because remember Lot's wife. And like I said, person we don't even know her name is the one person we're told because she's the one that missed out on the kingdom. And why did she miss out on the kingdom? Because she had no remorse. She had no remorse. Her remorse was actually leaving. The remorse wasn't that she was participating in the worldly things. Her remorse was that she had to leave it behind. So that's the point. Let's say now, let's say that tomorrow, Yahweh is bringing His people to the wilderness, right? And when we go to the wilderness, like I said, if it's Yahweh's wilderness, that means no electricity. That means no internet. That means no refrigerators, no indoor toilets, none of these things, right? So what is it? What is it that you don't want to go to that wilderness for? What is it? And you could say, oh, no, I can do without it, I can do without it. Well, if you can do without it, then do without it now. Don't lie to yourself and don't lie to Yahweh and say, well, if an angel takes you there, then you'll do without it. If you can do without it, then do without it now. Make that stand today. Stop lying to Yahweh. Stop telling Him He's first in your life and then putting all these other things before Him. Because if you are Lot's wife. You are a pillar of salt if you're doing that. It's that simple. And that's the message He's given us. And praise Yahweh, we were just there that we can understand it better than anybody. 3 weeks we're here, we're all different people. But we got a week to go. Don't take anything out of here that's part of Lot's wife. Whatever it is, whatever that idol is, right? You know, just like with Achan and the idol that he had hidden there. Whatever is that idol, you got a week to go, let it go. Let it go. And it's not necessarily even something physical. Like I said, if it's a lustful spirit, if it's pride, whatever it is that you have become, now is the time to let it go. We got 1 week to go. Let it go. Because, you know, you never know as your life goes on. Yahweh is Elohim of many, many mercies. But I say you'll never have a greater opportunity than now to let that go. So you really got to pray about it, though. What is it? What is it that you don't want to leave behind of Satan's system? You know, we've had all these classes on the Qumran sect and on the Amish. Why is it that we're not living like the Amish? You know, why is it that people that are not even first fruits, they don't even know Yahweh's name, they don't keep the 10 Commandments, why are they shaming us in their lifestyle compared to ours? What is the answer? Like I said, ask better questions, get better answers. Why are we not more like them? And it's because in certain ways in our life, we are a pillar of salt. In certain ways of our life, we have hardened ourselves that we say it, but we're not doing it. So let's go into this. Because it's, like I said, it's the biggest lesson, end time lesson that we could have. She was a pillar of salt, meaningly she would not change. She would not change. Luke 17, let's go back there. Luke 17 and verse 28. It says, "And likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, building," right? So things were pretty good. In Sodom, it was a good economy. They didn't lack nothing. It wasn't really bad, like we see today. "But on the day Lot went out from Sodom, Yahweh rained down fire and brimstone from the heaven and destroyed all of them." And we see it today. We actually can see Sodom and Gomorrah. We see the remains of that. Like I said, the sulfur balls are there. According to those things, it will be in the day the Son of Man is revealed. So according to that, he says it'll be in our day. "In that day, he who will be on the housetop, let him not come down to take his goods from the house. And likewise, he in the field, let him not return for the things behind," right? Let him not return for the things behind. What is it? What is it that we're being Lot's wife? What is it that we're looking back for that we just won't let go? And I say I'm preaching to the choir because you're all here because you want to let go. Even if you haven't yet, you want to. So that's what we're here for. I'm more worried for the people that won't even come. That the people that will hear this sermon, and it'll go out to, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people that will watch it, and they'll agree with it, and they won't change. They won't change. They become a pillar of salt. And that's the sad part, as we're looking at, we're going to see here, there's not many people that make it in this time. We are in a time that is, like Yahweh says, the worst time that man will ever know. And praise him, at least on the other side, we'll never come back to this horror. But knowing that every single thing we see in this world will be gone, and in the kingdom everything is made anew, what are we holding on to here? What is in our mental mind holding on to? And sometimes it's just a spirit of fear, that we can't let that go. And again, you'll never build real faith if you're holding on to a spirit of fear. Doesn't necessarily have to be something physical. It could simply be that way. It could be a spirit of fear, of just not wanting to let go. And the next verse, remember Lot's wife. "Whoever seeks to save his life, he will lose it. And whoever tries to lose it will preserve it." So, I did a message a while ago called something like preparation, faith or lack of it. And preparation is a good thing. It shows diligence and it shows belief. Because if we really believe Yahweh, we would be prayer. Now, again, if you're preparing though like a prepper and you think that those things are going to save you, then you're kidding yourself. And what I say is, most of my preparation is probably for somebody else. Because if I got to flee, and we've done it before, our family has at least went from place to place at least 3 or 4 times where we just had to leave everything behind. So be it. There's nothing I look for. From Babylon, to Israel, to other places we've been, where we literally had to pick up and go, and there's nothing that I left behind that I think about. There are things, whatever I need, Yahweh will bring. And I learned a big lesson when I first left Babylon, because I left there taking everything. And I had a 40-foot container that got stuck in customs, purposely, because every day it's there, they're charging you money. And at the end, the thousands and thousands of dollars it costs to get that thing out of customs, months later, and then you open it up and most of your stuff is broken. And that was my first thing I told people when they're leaving Babylon. Only take what you absolutely need, and anything else buy wherever you're going. Any electronical stuff, it's different. The electric in America is different than the electric in most places. There it's 110, most places it's 220, and it doesn't make any sense. And I think about it now. Why on earth did I do? Why would I load up a 40-foot container, taking all that stuff out of Babylon? I thought the spoils of Egypt, you know. And you reap what you sow. But I learned from it, you know, that you don't need virtually nothing. And I remember even leaving a few boxes at my parents' house. I thought were the most important things to me. When I went back there like 10 years later, when my dad's selling the house, I didn't remember they were there. And I'm like, whoa, I thought this was important 10 years ago? Nah, throw it out. You know, who needs that? But we have to think. Think about it. What is it? What is your pillar of salt? What are you holding on to? Naked, you come into the world, naked you go. There's nothing that you take into the grave, and there's nothing you're going to take into the kingdom. It's that simple. Our trust has to be in Yahweh in the resurrection. Genesis 13. So now let's go back in Genesis and see this a little bit. Because what was it? What was it? You know, like we look at Sodom today, right? And it's nothing but ash. It's not a plush place. You know, the Dead Sea is the lowest point on the earth. Nothing can grow in there, but it wasn't like that at this time. Back then, it was the most beautiful. It was like the Garden of Eden. Genesis 13 and verse 5. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them for dwelling together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. How much Yahweh's blessing them, right? Because they followed his word. Abraham, get up and go, and Abraham went. Like I said, you got the three fleeing plans. You know, the Abraham plan is the best one. Get up and go, you get up and go, and wow, boy, is that a good plan. You got to take all your things, you got to take your goats and your sheep, you got to take your servants. Then we have the one, you know, if you really can't afford the Abraham plan, we have the Israelite plan. It's a pretty good plan, you know. You get the spoils of Egypt, and it's not bad. You know, not as good as the Abraham, but, you know, if you're not in a financial position, the Israelite plan isn't good. But if you're really, really financially in trouble, we got the Lot plan. The Lot plan is not the plan I really like to sell to people. Why? Because it's leave now or die. You know, it's like, and it's not the preparation for taking things, it's the preparation for up here. I'm out of Babylon 25 years and I still haven't gotten all this out of here. I fear for the people that got to leave in that last moment. Because mentally is what's going to be the problem. You know, they're not going to make it. If your mind is in commercial Babylon, if your mind is in Satan's system, and that's where Lot's wife was. That's why she was a pillar of salt. It wasn't just in the possessions. It was in her mind. Her mindset was, there was no way she was going to the wilderness. She didn't want to go up and live in some cave somewhere. You know, she liked the thing. So let's continue reading here. In verse 6, and the land was not able to bear them for dwelling together, for their substance was great, so they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abraham's flock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite lived then in the land. And Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen. For we are men brothers. Is not all the land before you? Please separate from me. If you go to the left, then I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, then I go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the circuit of the Jordan, and it was well watered before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt as you come to Zoar. Wow. So it was like the Garden of Eden there at that time. Now look at it. And since this time, 3,800 years, you can't find a weed there in Gomorrah. Literally, you can't find one weed there. It's just ash. The whole place is ash. But now I look here and I say, when we're analyzing Lot, because Lot was a big problem to his wife too, just like we said with Adam, you know, you look at that story, where on earth is Adam? Where is he, the priest of the family? Why is Eve palling around with Satan, and why is Adam allowing it? He abdicated his position there. And we see the same thing here with Lot, right? Now, Abraham is the older one. Abraham is you know, his tutor, you could say, you know, and he's his uncle. And you would think that Lot would say, you know, no, my uncle, you know, you choose. You take whatever it is and I'll take what's left over. But Lot didn't do that, right? Abraham totally trusted in Yahweh. And it's the same like when you see Jacob with Laban, right? When he's going for the wages and whatever, goats and sheep, whatever the one is speckled, I'll take the speckled, whatever the spotted is spotted, and whatever one that was given to him, then they all came out that way. Because that's the way Yahweh works. So Yahweh's going to bless us. We don't need to bless ourselves. And that's why I say, I don't need to pray and ask him for personal things, because he knows better than I do. He wants to give me more than I can ever imagine. So I don't want to limit him by asking for things. I want to just allow him to give me what I need. But here it is. Lot should have said to Abraham, as his forefather, no, my father, you take whatever and I'll take what's left. But he didn't, right? Lot lifts his eyes and he's lusting for all of the place there. Then Lot chose all the circuit of the Jordan for himself, and Lot set forth eastward, and they were separated, each one from his brother. And Abram lived in the land of Canaan, and Lot lived in the cities of the circuit, and tented as far as Sodom. And the men of Sodom were evil and sinners before Yahweh, exceedingly so. So why wasn't he thinking of that instead of thinking of how plush the land was? And that's why I say environment is 90% of your battle. If you're living in the inner cities with all evil people, how's your spiritual life going to be? You got to get away. You got to get to the wilderness. That's the main reason Yahweh does it. Get away from the mixed multitude. So we see these are all problems that happened there. The men of Sodom were evil and sinners before Yahweh, exceedingly so. Sodom was a plush, beautiful, blessed land, and Lot made the decision based on flesh, not on prayer. It was lust, the lust of the eyes, right? Genesis 14, verse 12 through 14. And then what happens? We see that these 5 kings are having a war there, right? And in verse 12, they took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, and his goods and left, and he was living in Sodom. And one who escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he was living among the oaks of Mamre, which is Hebron, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and Aner, and these were possessor of a covenant with Abraham. And when Abraham heard that his brother was captured, even then he led out his trained men born of his household, 318, and they pursued as far as Dan. And we've seen there's actually a gate there in Tel Dan from the time of Abraham. That's still there today. They just uncovered it, X amount of years ago. So they go all the way up. This is on the Lebanese border. This is as far as Israel goes on the Lebanese border. And then what happens? Abraham goes up and captures them, right? In verse 16, and he brought back all the goods, and he also brought back his brother and the women and the people. So my question is, though, maybe when Lot went to Sodom, he didn't realize how bad it was. Or maybe he knew, it says that people were evil, maybe he didn't realize how bad. But why, after he left there, and it wasn't even on his own, he was kidnapped and taken way away, all the way up to the border with Lebanon, why on earth did he go back there? Why, when he was freed from Abraham, did he go back there? So maybe his wife wasn't the only, pillar of salt. Maybe Lot also, to a large degree. Lot didn't have to return to Sodom. He could have stayed in Dan or anywhere else. And that's why I say, the worst thing in the world isn't necessarily not leaving Babylon. The worst thing in the world is leaving and going back. That's the worst thing. Because a lot of the people that are there have no idea, because they're so conditioned to it, they think it's normal. My dad used to always say that. He'd say, why would anybody want to live anywhere but New Jersey? And I'm thinking, I can think of a lot of places I'd rather live than New Jersey. Nothing against New Jersey. I was born there. But it's not, like the best place. No, but that's what he would think because he was born there, You get so conditioned for it, you don't realize, how it is. So like I said, I understand, especially people that aren't converted, why, people wouldn't leave their homeland. That's not an evil thing. An easy thing, rather. But why, when Yahweh delivers you, and like I tell people that leave Babylon and something happens, they lose their job or lose their visa, and I say there's 196 other countries you can go to. You don't have to go back to Babylon. Unless you're like Lot, you're being kidnapped or put in chains, there's 196 places you can go to. There's always an alternative. And if you really see Babylon as an evil place and all this, and I say to everyone, not just those from Babylon, but commercial Babylon is everywhere. So I say the same thing. You know, once you leave the city and you go out to the wilderness, why would you go back to the city? Why on earth would you go back there? And there's only one reason. Because you're a pillar of salt. You go back there because you like it. You're not going back there because you don't like it. And I'm being hard in this message because I hope this message may save somebody's eternal life. Not just in this room, but as it goes out here. I really hope this message might save somebody's eternal life. Because you got to ask those hard questions, you know. What is it you're willing to lose the kingdom of Yahweh for? Lot should have never went back there. He went back there because he loved the pleasures. He loved the pleasures of it. 2 Peter 2 in verse 6. Says, in the covering of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah with ashes, he condemned them with an overthrow, setting an example to men intending to live unholy lives. And also delivered righteous Lot, who was tormented with the filthy conduct of the lawless. For that righteous one living among them day by day, and seeing and hearing, his righteous soul was tormented with their lawless deeds. And you know something? I believe it. Scripture says it, and I believe he was tormented with it. But part of it was his own fault, and part of it was his choice. The same with us. That sometimes we know that the conditions around us are bad. We know that they're not good. And yet for whatever, normalcy bias, I don't know. Something that they're there that you like, but there's many brethren that do the same thing. And they'll sit there and torture themselves day after day for no reason whatsoever. Because they don't have to. So we have to look at the same way. That here it was, righteous Lot, yeah, and I don't doubt it. Yahweh said it, I don't know him, but all I know is he did have a choice and he didn't have to go back there. So he's got to take accountability for that. And how many of us maybe, you know, our pillar of salt, why aren't we letting it go? What is it? And like I said, sometimes it's fear. I know it. Sometimes it's lack of faith. And fear is the opposite of faith. You can't have both. You have one or the other. But whatever it is, we got to deal with it, and you got to get over it. You got to crumble that pillar of salt. What is your pillar of salt? Genesis 19. Let's go back now to Genesis 19 and see here. Starting in verse 12. And the men said to Lot, who is still with you? So this is after the cherubs are in there, right? And they're telling him to leave. And the men said to Lot, who is still with you? Bring out of this place your sons and your daughter-in-laws and your daughters, and whoever belongs to you in the city. For we are about to destroy this place, for the cry of them is great before Yahweh, and Yahweh has sent us to destroy it. And I can tell you this much, the cry of this world and the cries of the sin of this world are definitely up to the throne of Yahweh. There's no doubt about that. There's more evil in this world than probably there's ever been. And Lot went out, verse 14, to speak to his son-in-law, his sons-in-law, those taking his daughters. And he said, rise up, go out from this place, for Yahweh is about to destroy the city. And he seemed as one joking to his son-in-laws. Why? Probably because he was telling them all the time, right, of how evil the place was. And Yahweh's judgment's coming, the same as us. And it's the same as us as we're telling people. We seem as one joking, but you know what? It's no joke. It's no joke. Because it wasn't a joke when Lot's wife got turned into a pillar of salt. It wasn't a joke when every single person in Sodom was killed by the sulfur bolts. That was no joke. It wasn't a joke when Noah went into the ark, and 100 years later, right? For 100 years it was a big joke. Look at this guy. Because it never ever even rained on the earth. And he's building this big gigantic, thing. Look at him. But yet, when the rain started coming, if you saw the ark today, you'd see the scratches on the doors of the people screaming to get in as they all died. And that's the time we're living in now. There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not for repentance, but because the evil, corrupted human nature that's at its full now, and the demonic forces. I was talking with somebody the other day about, are we at that point where the demons are let loose out of the pit? And I do believe we're there. There is so much demonic activity, and I believe it's probably through CERN that it happened, because they have hit those black holes, maybe not, but it's a guess. But whether it is through CERN or not, you can see it. The evidence is there that these demons are out. So what on earth are we trying to hold on to? Why are we holding on to that pillar of salt? And what happens? So he seems as one joking, right? And when the dawn arose, then the cherubs urged him, what are you doing? Come on, rise up, take your wife, your daughters that are found, lest you be consumed in the perversity of the city. And he lingered. He lingered. And that's the problem with us today. We're lingering. Lingering is the worst thing in the world, because like I said, when you don't make a decision, you are making a decision. You're making a decision. Lingering is a decision. And it's a bad one. It's a bad decision. So they lingered. And the men lay hold of his hand and his wife's hand and the hand of the two daughters, Yahweh having mercy on him. Let's pray he has mercy on us. And they caused him to go out, and they put him outside the city. And it happened as they led them outside, he said, escape for your life. Don't look behind you. Do not stay in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest you be swept away. Just like we read in Luke. What did he say? Those on the housetop, don't even come down to get your stuff. So there is something going to happen in the world, something that is going to be, boom, a quick thing where people do have to get out. And he's saying it. And he's saying, don't look back. Not literally not looking back, but also mentally not looking back. Because the ones that are going to look back and they're going to keep thinking of what they left behind, that's Lot's wife. They're the ones that are the pillar of salt. Drop down to verse 23. The sun had gone forth on the earth, and Lot came into Zoar. And Yahweh on earth rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh into the heavens. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain, and all those living in the cities, and the produce of the ground. And his wife looked back with pleasure from behind, and she became a pillar of salt. Right? There was something there she couldn't leave. There was something there she couldn't leave. So what is it? What is it in your life? What is that pillar of salt? What is that thing that even when Yahweh is delivering you, you have to look back? He lingered because of the good lifestyle they had. And even when it was destroyed, it was hard for him to go. And that's why I've been telling people for 20 years to lower your standard of living. It just helps you as a believer to begin with. Lower your standard of living, but mentally it helps you in everything in life to prepare for what's coming, and just preparing even for your death, because again, you're not taking anything with you. Naked you come into the world, naked you go down, and there's nothing that you take with you. It's what we come out with, because when we're resurrected, you're coming out with that character you made. That's what you're taking into the kingdom as a spirit being, the character. And that's why we're becoming like Yahweh. And that's why Yeshua came in the flesh to go before us and to set the stage. And we can see exactly, we don't have to guess, because he did everything. All we have to do is follow his perfect example, because he did it all before us. Numbers 11, because the grass is always greener on the other side. And sometimes we make excuses on why we agree, oh, no, I know I need to do A, B, and C, but this is the reason why I can't do it. We always, like I said, the grass is always greener on the other side. Let's see an example here from Scripture. And the people were evil, right? As we see with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, as those complaining in the ears of Yahweh. And Yahweh heard, and his anger glowed, and the fire of Yahweh burned among them and devoured in the extreme edge of the camp. So, who's in the extreme edge of the camp? The goats. The sheep are all together. The goats are always in the extreme edge of the camp. And the people cried to Moses, and Moses prayed to Yahweh, and the fire was quenched. And he called the name of that place Taberah, because the fire of Yahweh burned among them. And the mixed multitude, here's again, you got to get away from that mixed multitude. The mixed multitude will destroy your spiritual life. They will destroy your faith. The mixed multitude, I said about getting rid of the what-ifs. The mixed multitude are only what-ifs. Their whole lives are what-ifs. And that's what Satan does. He uses the mixed multitude to put those what-ifs into your ears. So you got to get rid of that mixed multitude. The mixed multitude among them lusted with a great lust. And the sons of Israel turned back and wept, right? Turned back. Just like Lot's wife. Said, who shall cause us to eat flesh? So as long as they were going forward, and they were going from stop to stop, they had no problem. The minute the mixed multitude started giving the what-ifs in their ears, they started looking back to what they had. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. And now our soul withers. There is nothing except this manna before our eyes. Can you imagine? The perfect food that Yahweh gave them from heaven. And they're saying there is nothing except this manna. And how many times when Yahweh is giving exactly what we need in our life to move forward, are we looking back and saying, if I only had this? If I only had this. You know, if I had money, if I had a job, if I had whatever, if I had this. Instead of looking at what he gave us, looking at the manna he's giving you to survive. Remember what Yeshua said. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of itself. You know, today, if you have food and raiment, be content with that. And sometimes that's the problem. That was the problem with Lot's wife. Part of the looking back was not just that she didn't want to leave, she was afraid of what the future was. She knew what she had in Sodom, right? It was a great life. They had everything they needed there. She had no idea what was going to be up in a cave somewhere. And verse 10 says, and Moses heard the people weeping by its families, each at the door of the tent, and the anger of Yahweh glowed exceedingly in the eyes of Moses. It was evil, right? Of course, Yahweh. He's giving them everything. He did the 10 miracles. He parts the Red Sea. He brings them out. He has water come out of the rock. And what's their answer? Are they glorifying Yahweh? It's no. No, we had it better in Egypt. How? What? You can't get a more spirit of disappreciation than that. And it's all part of Lot's wife. It's all part, sometimes we don't even realize how much we're not appreciating what Yahweh's giving us by not embracing what we have instead of thinking, uh-oh, what might we not have tomorrow? Either he's there or he's not. That's what faith is. You either believe it or you don't. Like I said, the grass is always greener on the other side. This is a lack of faith. How quickly they forgot their slavery, their bondage, how much they suffered by the Egyptians, because they allowed their lust to pervert their reality. So whether it's a spirit of fear, like I said, your neuroassociations, whatever it is in you that you're not getting rid of yet, it's perverting your reality. Because the reality is, you know, Yahweh is, and he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, right? Yahweh is, and all things work for the good of those who trust Yahweh and are called according to purpose. That's the reality. But when we're dealing in unreality, when we're dealing in fear or lust or whatever it is, we get perverted to an unreality. Whatever you focus on becomes most real. Your focus has to be on the spiritual. The blessing that Yahweh has given each and every one of us every day of our life. I mean, that's why you need to read that every day. Read those blessings every single day. You know, because Yahweh has given us so much more than we can even imagine. 2 Peter 2 and verse 20. And one thing is, there's no option of return. You know, that was the thing. That here was, whatever Lot's wife, and again, we don't know a lot about her, we don't even know her name, but we do know that her motive was wrong. We do know that she didn't want to leave behind, and we also know she was being delivered. She had a new life ahead of her. Yahweh was giving her a brand new start. So she could have left there and left all of that baggage behind and started all over again. That's why I say, there's a reason why we come out here for the program. We're doing it because we're getting you out of your environment. You can't do it if you're in your environment that you're doing every day. You have to get out of that environment. You have to start all over. And that's why I say, you got 30 days here to start anything you want to start. If you're not doing enough Bible study, you can do it here. You're not doing enough prayer, you can do it here. There's something you want to get rid of, you can do it here. So you have every ability to start new. And what did Lot's wife do with it? She didn't want it. She was a pillar of salt. She had no desire to change. And if you don't have a desire to change, then none of it will seem like anything. 2 Peter 2:20, for if when they have escaped the pollutions of the world, by the knowledge of our Master and Redeemer, Yeshua the Messiah, they become again entangled in the very same thing and are overcome by them, their later end is worse with them than the beginning. For it was better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having recognized it and turned from the holy commandment delivered to them. But the word of the true proverb has happened to them. The dog returns to his own vomit, also the sow that was washed to the walling in the mud. So this is why sometimes Yahweh knows better than we do. And sometimes it's better for our friends and our family not to be called now. Yahweh knows why he calls and he doesn't. But one thing is, now we were called. Now we have this information. Now you are accountable. There's no turning back. And that's why I'm trying to be fervent, because we have a chance to go to a place in our life that we've never been before. And Yahweh's taken us. And like I said, we already mentioned it. If I ask every single person here, have you grown in faith? Every single person said yes. Maybe some to some degree, some to other degree. But we're not the person we came here. And this is why the road doesn't stop here. We have to continue on this road you started now. And you don't want to turn back. You don't want to be like, the dog to the vomit. It's the greatest lack of ingratitude to look back at our former life and think it is better than now. I remember in Church of God, I used to see these ministers go up there and say, oh, if I wasn't a minister, and these guys were getting $40,000, $50,000 a year, and this was back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. That was good money because that was only pocket money. They also got a car, their gas, their insurance, a house. Their house was all the rent, every utility. So that $40,000, $50,000 was basically pocket money, and they'd go up there. If I wasn't a minister, I'd be making all this money, blah, 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 blah. It's like, what a spirit of unappreciation, And what happened? When the leader changed the doctrines, all those hirelings stayed because they didn't want to lose their salary. So much for them, I could be making all this money somewhere else. It is such a spirit of unappreciation when we come to Yahweh that way. It's the greatest lack of ingratitude to look back on our former life, to think it was better than now. How ungrateful, how disrespectful to Yahweh. And it is also so untrue that our life before was a life of darkness. It was a life of disarray. It was a life of untruth. And Yahweh has called us now to have eyes to see and ears to hear, and to have relationship with Him and to know Him. How on earth can our former life ever be like that? Luke 13 and verse 23. I'm going to start piecing it all together. Luke 13 and verse 23. It says, and the master said to the slave, go out into the highways and the hedges and compel... I'm in Luke 14. Luke 13. I'll be in 14 next, though. Don't worry, we'll get there. And a man asked him, Master, are the ones being saved few? But Yeshua said to them, labor to enter in through the narrow gate. For I say to you that many will seek to enter in and will not have strength. From that hour the master of the house rises and secures the door. Then they will stand outside and knock on the door and begin to say, our master, open to us. And he will answer and he will say, I say to you that I do not know from where you are. Then they will begin to say, we ate and we drank with you. And they'll say, depart from me, workers of falsehood. So, it's the same way that some of the men here have been running up that hill. And it's a pretty heavy hill to run there. And if you never did it, or you're not used to it, You know, you probably can't even get up one time. But as you do it every day, every week, you build conditioning to yourself. And the Apostle Paul even uses that in Corinthians 9, you know, that our calling is like a race. And the reason why most of these people are not able to do it is not that they don't have physical strength, they don't have spiritual strength. They don't have spiritual strength, because as we're seeing, it's like something's going to happen. And I don't think we have to have too much of an imagination in our world to see it, but something's happening where it's something quick. Whether it's world war or something quick, and he's saying, if you're on the roof, don't even come down for your stuff. Get out of there, you know? And if you're not building spiritual strength in your life, you're going to be scared to death. And I'm telling you, I went through it. I tell the story when we left America and went to Honduras. And I thought I had faith going there until I got there and realized I had no faith. And it was the scariest time in my life. To sit there knowing everything I had physically was gone, I had nowhere to go, and I was scared to death. Because I realized I had no faith. And I had no other option but just to trust in Yahweh, and that's where He started building my faith from there. But it's not something that's going to come overnight. You've got to build it. You've got to work on it. And as you work on it, all of these little inhibitions and all these little fears in your mind will go out the window. Because how could you have fear when you're at the throne of Yahweh, you know? And He knows the hairs on our head, and He knows our needs. And He will care for us. He's not going to not back us. But certainly, like He says in Jacob, you know, the person that doubts is going to get nothing. It can't be a hope. It's got to be either real or it's not. You got to believe Him or it's not. And if you have a relationship, that's what makes it real. That relationship with Him. So, like He says here, will many be saved? No. No, many will not be saved. Go to Luke 14. Starting in verse 16, He said to him, a certain man made a great supper and invited many. And he sent his slave at the supper hour to say to those who had been invited, come, for now all is ready. And with one mind they began to beg off. The first said, I have to bought a field, and I need to go and see it. I ask you, have me excused. Another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to try them. I asked, have me excused. Another said, I married a wife, and for this reason I'm not able to come. And having come up, that master reported these things to his master. That slave reported the things to his master. Then being angry, the housemaster said to his slave, go out into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor, and the maimed, and the lamed, and the blind ones. And the slave said, sir, it has been done as you ordered, and still there's more room. And the master said, go into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I said to you, not one of those men who had been invited shall taste of my dinner. And I'm telling you, the wedding invitations have already went out. This is the time we're living in now. And I think to myself, you know, like in the first century of when Yeshua was there, you know, and the wife coming in to the husband, you know, maybe they're living up in Bethsaida or something. And she's like, you know, Itzhak, the rabbi is going to be here today, that young rabbi that they're all talking about. I want to go, I want to hear what he has to say. Nah, Martha, I got work to do. You know, listen to some young man with new ideas. That ain't gonna feed the chickens. And how many people that had that kind of attitude lost out in the first century? That they actually lived there. They actually were there at that time that He was alive, and their life didn't change whatsoever. Because they were so ingrained on the cares of the world. They were so ingrained, you know, on just everyday life and survival, that they couldn't see there's more to life than that. That's what we said. We're studying the great human potential. And what a potential Yahweh has for us. That here it is, He made us out of dirt and clay and water, but He didn't make us to stay that way. He made us that way to humble us, to build us up, to become like Him. And like I said, to be a resurrected, glorified spirit being, to be a king and a priest in His kingdom, to reign with Him forever. And as I said, all of these billions and billions of stars and galaxies and all these things, only He knows what He has planned. But He's called each and every one of us to be part of that plan, that family business. And now we're at the very end. Like I said, a few more nights of going to bed and waking up before His feet go on that Mount of Olives, and all of this will be changed. And where is our heart? You know, like I said, what is our pillar of salt? Because we should have a pillar of salt, you know. We should have a good pillar of salt, right? Let's go to Revelation 3. Because pillars are important. Revelation 3 in verse 12. The one overcoming, I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my Elohim. And he will not go out anymore. And I will write my name of my Elohim on him, in the name of the city of my Elohim, the New Jerusalem, which comes out of heaven from my Elohim, and my new name. So he says this to the Philadelphians, the ones that aren't changing, the ones that are overcoming, that we will be a pillar of salt in a good way. You know, the ones that are holding on to the doctrine, the ones that are living for Yahweh, the ones that are building faith, the ones that are bearing fruit in their life. And he says we will be that foundation that he's building forever. We will be part of that foundation of the kingdom of Yahweh that will be built forever. And like he says, in the kingdom, there'll be no sanctuary, because him and Yeshua will be the sanctuary, like Yeshua said. Prove to us you're the Messiah. I will tear down that sanctuary in 3 days. I will build it up. And he did. And we are pieces of that sanctuary. We're part of his very body. And that's what he says. We are the sanctuary of Yahweh. And are you a pillar in that sanctuary? You know, or are you, maybe a broken, whatever, broken nail? That's the choice we have to make. But that's what he called us for. That is our destiny. That's why it should be the highest honor in our life to serve him. It should be the highest honor in our life to grow in his grace every day, to build a relationship with him. And he'll speak to you and he'll talk to you. And that's what he's doing in these times we're living in. But we can't look back. We can't look back. There's nothing back there for us. We cannot have remorse for what we're leaving behind. You got to let it go. Whatever is that pillar of salt in your life, like I said, whether it's something physical that you can't let go, some kind of technology or a job, or whether it's spiritual and it's fear, or it's lust, or it's greed, or it's whatever, it's time to let it go. Lot's wife looked back to see the punishment, and she was happy with those being killed in destruction. She also longed after and lusted for her old life. She had a worldly spirit. She did not see the kingdom of Yahweh. She was a pillar of salt in a bad way. She refused to change even when she had a fresh start. Like I said, pillars hold up buildings and are foundation and strength. Today we see many pillars in Israel, and even here too in Jordan. When you go to many of these old places, the tells, the ancient places, you see pillars that are standing still after thousands of years, to show you what a pillar does. We're called pillars in the body of Messiah if we have strong faith, as the apostles will be literally 12 pillars in the New Jerusalem. So our faith is built on their faith. And that's why I say, you know what? It's great enough to think Yeshua walked on water, and yes, he was a human being at that time, and wow, if he could walk on water, I can. But even greater than that is Peter walked on water. Peter, who didn't have faith in the beginning, right? And denied Yeshua 3 times. And all the problems that Peter had, but he did have courage, and he did step out of the box. And like Yeshua said, when you're empowered, strengthen my people. And he did do that. And Peter, a human being, walked on water. And when did he start to fall? When he started looking around, right? And he started to see circumstances. Because like I said, a miracle is something that is not normal. It's something out of the normal realm. And you can't let, when you're in that miracle, you can't let the surrounding things around you stop the miracle. Like we saw a couple of weeks ago with Elder Pong, right? He was stung by a scorpion. He could have died. And yet Yahweh did a miracle. Yahweh healed him. Now we can't let anything around, any physical thing, because in normal circumstances, yes, normal circumstances, we better get him in the hospital. We better get that shot. But not when Yahweh intervenes. We don't want to be, we want to be like Peter to get out of the boat, right? And have the faith to walk on the water. We don't want to be like Peter to look around us and see the normal circumstances and think, what am I doing? And that's what happens. Sometimes we'll take that step, we'll get out of the boat, but then we see the circumstance and say, what on earth am I doing? And that's simply just a lack of faith. So we don't want to be there. We don't want to do that. We want to be those pillars that are those foundations of faith forever. Salt is also a preservative that's needed to save life, right? We need salt in our body. In ancient times, people were actually paid in salt. That's where the word salary comes from. People were paid in salt because it was a preservative and a preservative for food. So salt is good, like Yeshua said, but what if it loses its saltiness? The expression even, it used to be, if you ever heard this, he's worth his weight in salt. Meaning he's a hard worker, right? Because the word salary. So, Lot's wife was a pillar of salt, that her punishment was sure and unchanging. She was almost saved. Cherubs were ready to lead her to safety, and she chose to ignore the warnings and look back in regret and fear for what she was leaving behind. She never mentally left Sodom. We have to mentally today leave commercial Babylon. It's not enough to physically. Believe me, through the years, I've met, I can't tell you how many people I've met, not even in our congregation necessarily, but other people. A lot of people believe America's Babylon. And I met a lot of people that say, oh, we left Babylon. And within 2-3 months, they're right back where they started, like the dog to the vomit. I'm talking about every single one of us, every single believer in our congregation should be leaving commercial Babylon. There's no reason why anybody should be in commercial Babylon at this point. And again, doesn't mean go up to the moon. You know, we're in the world but not of the world. We have a ministry here. But I'm saying to be tied in, connected, where, you know, you can't survive without being part of Satan's system. That's what made Lot's wife lose her salvation. So, we have to be looking at where we can get out from Satan's society, the prince of the power of the airwaves. We need to remember Lot's wife, not to make the same mistakes she made. We need to look past this society and commercial Babylon today and the cares of the world and live for Yahweh's eternal kingdom and His true covenant of salt. An eternal covenant with us and His children as kings and priests and pillars in that kingdom forever. So, like I said, wow, what a great time to give a sermon like this, just being up there, right? I pray you learned the lessons on why we need to remember Lot's wife. So we will turn this off and